Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepy Science Society. Tonight, we are drifting into the shimmering world of one of nature's most extraordinary creatures. As you settle into this gentle journey, I invite you to like and subscribe if you enjoy these quiet explorations into the wonders of our world. Your support helps others find this peaceful corner where science becomes a companion to rest. But for now, there is nothing you need to do except relax. Let your breath slow. Allow your shoulders to soften. And let us drift together into the remarkable story of the hummingbird. Imagine standing in a garden on a warm summer morning. The air is still, touched only by the lightest breeze carrying the scent of flowers opening to the sun. Suddenly, you hear it. A soft humming, like the whisper of tiny wings moving faster than your eye can follow. Before you can turn your head, a flash of iridescent green appears at the edge of your vision, hovering impossibly in mid-air beside a crimson bloom. The creature is so small, so delicate, that it seems almost unreal. A jewel suspended in space and time. This is the hummingbird, and everything about it defies what we think we know about the limits of life. These tiny aviators belong to the family Trochilidae, a name derived from the Latin word meaning a small bird, though even this understates their diminutive nature. They are found only in the Americas, stretching from the cold edges of Alaska all the way south to the windswept landscapes of Tierra del Fuego at the southern tip of South America. Nowhere else on Earth will you find them. They are a gift unique to this side of the planet, and yet within this geographic boundary, they have diversified into a breathtaking array of forms. Scientists have identified approximately 375 species, each adapted to specific environments, each carrying its own patterns of color and behavior. Their closest relatives are the swifts and tree swifts, birds that share some of their aerial agility but lack the hovering mastery that defines the hummingbird. The evolutionary split between these groups occurred somewhere between 40 and 50 million years ago, when their common ancestor lived in what is now Eurasia. Remarkably, fossils discovered in Germany in 2004 revealed that hummingbirds once inhabited Europe around 30 million years ago. These ancient remains, the oldest known hummingbird fossils, tell us that the family has undergone dramatic geographic shifts over deep time. At some point, they vanished entirely from the Old World and flourished exclusively in the New World, where they found niches in deserts, rainforests, alpine meadows, and coastal scrublands. Today, the greatest diversity of hummingbird species is found in the northern Andes of South America, where up to 130 species can exist in relatively small areas of humid montane forest. The geological transformation of these mountains over the past 10 million years appears to have accelerated their evolution, creating isolated valleys and peaks where populations diverged into new forms. As the landscape shifted, so did the flowers, and hummingbirds co-evolved with the nectar-bearing plants that sustained them. Some species developed bills that curve to match the exact shape of particular blossoms, creating partnerships so specific that neither bird nor flower can thrive without the other. Among all these species, one holds the record for being the smallest bird on Earth. The bee hummingbird, found only in Cuba, measures just 5 centimeters from the tip of its bill to the end of its tail. It weighs less than 2 grams, lighter than a single penny. To put this in perspective, you could theoretically mail 16 bee hummingbirds with a single first-class stamp, though of course no one would ever do such a thing. At the other end of the spectrum is the giant hummingbird of the Andes, which reaches nearly 23 centimeters in length and can weigh up to 31 grams. Even this largest member of the family remains a tiny creature by the standards of most birds. Most hummingbird species fall somewhere in between, measuring between 3 and 5 inches long, weighing between 2 and 20 grams. To hold one in your hand, if you could ever coax such a wild spirit to stillness, would be to feel almost nothing. The weight of 2 or 3 dimes. A creature so light that it seems more like an idea than a living thing. And yet, within this impossibly small body is packed more intensity, more metabolic fire, more sheer life force than exists in animals 100 times its size. Their physical structure is a study in extremes and elegant compromises. A hummingbird has the lowest number of feathers of any bird species, with only about 1,400 covering its entire body. Most birds carry many thousands. Yet those feathers are enough. They provide just sufficient insulation while keeping weight to an absolute minimum. The feathers themselves are architectural marvels. The males, in particular, display gorgets, small, stiff, highly reflective feathers on the throat and upper chest that catch light in ways that seem to defy physics. These feathers do not simply hold pigment. Instead, their structure refracts incoming light, splitting it into component colors much like a prism. The microscopic ridges on each feather act as a diffraction grating, and the spacing between these ridges determines which wavelengths of light are reflected back to the observer's eye. This is why the colors shift so dramatically as a hummingbird moves. A male ruby-throated hummingbird may appear to have a dull gray or black throat when seen from one angle, but when he turns his head just slightly and the sunlight strikes his gorget at the right angle, the throat explodes into brilliant metallic red. The color does not come from red pigment. It comes from the structure of the feathers themselves, bending light into ruby fire. Females, who do not need to advertise their presence to rivals or mates in the same way, tend to have more subdued plumage, though they too can carry hints of iridescence. But perhaps the most extraordinary aspect of the hummingbird's body lies not in what you can see, but in what you cannot. Beneath those glittering feathers, taking up nearly 30% of the bird's total body weight, are the pectoral muscles. These are the muscles that power flight, and in most bird species they account for only 15 to 18% of body mass. In hummingbirds, they are proportionally the largest flight muscles of any bird. This is not optional. It is a requirement for the kind of flight they perform. To understand why, we must turn our attention to the way a hummingbird moves through the air. Flight, for most birds, is a matter of flapping wings downward to generate lift and thrust, with the upstroke serving mainly to reposition the wing for the next downstroke. The power comes primarily from the descent of the wing. Hummingbirds, however, have evolved a completely different approach. Their wings stroke with power on both the downbeat and the upbeat. As the wing moves down, it generates lift. As it moves back up, it rotates and generates lift again, but in the opposite direction. This figure 8 motion combined with incredible speed, allows them to do something no other bird can sustain for extended periods. They can hover. Hovering is the signature ability of the hummingbird, and it is far more difficult than it appears. To remain stationary in midair requires continuous generation of lift to counteract gravity, with no forward momentum to help. The wings must beat fast enough to produce sufficient force, and the bird must make constant, tiny adjustments to account for air currents, shifts in balance, and the position of its body. A hummingbird in hover can keep its head perfectly still, aimed at a flower, while its wings become a blur on either side. Those wings are beating anywhere from 12 times per second in the giant hummingbird to around 80 times per second in smaller species. During normal flight, a ruby-throated hummingbird's wings beat approximately 75 times per second. But during the courtship displays, when a male performs steep dives to impress a watching female, that rate can increase to an astonishing 200 beats per second. The wings move so fast that they create a humming sound, a high-pitched vibration that gives these birds their name. It is not a vocalization. It is the sound of air being displaced by rapid, powerful motion. Each species has its own distinctive hum, and experienced observers can sometimes identify a hummingbird by sound alone before they ever see it. This speed comes at a cost. The energy expenditure required to sustain such rapid wing motion is almost unimaginable. A hovering hummingbird burns energy at a rate approximately 10 times higher, gram for gram, than an elite human endurance athlete at peak exertion. If a human being tried to match the metabolic intensity of a hovering hummingbird, adjusted for body size, our muscles would literally cook themselves from the inside. We would overheat and die within minutes. Hummingbirds manage this through a suite of adaptations that push the boundaries of vertebrate physiology. Their heart rate, for instance, varies wildly depending on activity level. At rest, the heart of a ruby-throated hummingbird beats around 225 times per minute, already far faster than the resting rate of most mammals. But when the bird takes flight and begins to hover, its heart rate can soar past 1,200 beats per minute. Some measurements have recorded rates as high as 1,260 beats per minute in blue-throated hummingbirds. That is more than 20 beats per second, a rhythm so rapid that if you could hear it, it would sound like a continuous hum rather than a series of individual pulses. To supply oxygen to muscles working at this intensity, the respiratory system must operate with equal speed. Breathing rate matches heart rate, with the bird taking in and expelling air as many as 250 times per minute while at rest, and far more during flight. The entire cardiovascular and respiratory system is tuned for maximum throughput, delivering oxygen and glucose to cells that are burning fuel at extraordinary rates. This brings us to another marvel. The blood sugar level of a hummingbird, even when fasting, would cause alarm in any human physician. Sustained blood glucose concentrations that would be medically dangerous, even life-threatening in mammals, are perfectly normal for these birds. They process sugar with an efficiency that borders on the miraculous. When a hummingbird feeds on nectar, the sugars enter its bloodstream within minutes and are immediately available as fuel. There is almost no delay between ingestion and utilization. The bird is essentially burning the sugar as it drinks, converting flower nectar directly into the energy needed for flight. In a single day, a hummingbird may consume up to double its body weight in nectar. Imagine a human drinking 150 pounds of sugary liquid every day and burning all of it off through sheer activity. It sounds impossible, yet for a hummingbird, this is routine. They must feed approximately every 10 minutes during daylight hours to maintain their energy levels. Go much longer without food, and the metabolic engine begins to falter. The bird's body temperature drops. It becomes sluggish. If it cannot find sustenance soon, it will enter a state called torpor, a survival mechanism that we will explore more deeply in a moment. The tongue of a hummingbird is as specialized as the rest of its anatomy. It extends far beyond the length of the bill, sometimes reaching twice the bill's length when fully extended. The tongue is not a simple tube for sucking up nectar. Instead, it is split at the tip, forming two grooves that can open and close. When the bird inserts its tongue into a flower, capillary action and the flexing of these grooves pull nectar along the tongue surface. The bird then retracts the tongue, pulls the nectar into its mouth, and extends the tongue again for another sip. This process happens approximately 13 times per second while feeding, a rapid, rhythmic lapping that extracts nectar with remarkable efficiency. The flight capabilities of hummingbirds extend far beyond hovering. They are also the only birds capable of sustained backward flight. While other passees can occasionally flutter backward for a moment, hummingbirds can reverse direction and fly backward with the same ease they fly forward. They can also fly upside down, at least briefly, and can make sharp, instantaneous turns in any direction. This three-dimensional mastery of aerial space gives them an agility unmatched in the avian world. In terms of speed, hummingbirds are faster than their small size might suggest. During level, direct flight, they can reach speeds of around 30 miles per hour, though this varies by species. The rufous hummingbird, one of the most aggressive and territorial species, has been observed keeping pace with vehicles traveling at speeds of 55 to 60 miles per hour during short bursts. During courtship dives, males reach even higher velocities. They climb to considerable heights, then plummet toward the ground in steep, controlled dives that can exceed 45 miles per hour. When measured relative to body length, an Anna's hummingbird performing a courtship dive moves at approximately 385 body lengths per second. For comparison, an F-15 fighter jet at its top speed of Mach 2.5 travels at only about 45 body lengths per second. In relative terms, the hummingbird is the faster flyer. All of this speed, all of this agility, all of this metabolic intensity is controlled by a brain so small it seems incapable of such feats. The brain of a hummingbird is about the size of a pea, and it accounts for roughly 4.2% of the bird's total body weight. In most animals, brain size correlates loosely with body size, but hummingbirds break this pattern. Their brains are proportionally larger than those of most other birds, and when you examine their structure closely, you find something even more remarkable. Within the hummingbird brain, the hippocampal formation, the region responsible for spatial memory and navigation, is enormously enlarged. When measured as a percentage of total brain volume, The hummingbird's hippocampal formation is 2 to 5 times larger than that of other songbirds, including species known for catching food and requiring strong spatial memory. This expansion reflects the cognitive demands placed on a creature that must remember the locations of hundreds or even thousands of individual OMAB. Flowers track when each one was last visited, estimate how long it takes for each flower to refill with nectar, and optimize a daily route that maximizes energy intake while minimizing wasted flight. Researchers studying rufous hummingbirds in southwestern Alberta conducted experiments to test the bird's spatial and temporal memory. They set up artificial feeders, some refilling every 10 minutes and others refilling every 20 minutes. The hummingbirds quickly learned which feeders refilled more frequently and adjusted their visiting patterns accordingly. But the astonishing part was not just that they remembered which feeders were which. They also remembered which specific feeder they had visited most recently in each category, allowing them to avoid wasting energy on flowers that had not yet refilled. Dr. Andy Hurley, one of the researchers involved in these studies, described the task as equivalent to a human trying to track 8 stopwatches simultaneously without writing anything down. And yet the hummingbirds managed it effortlessly, all while engaging in territorial disputes, avoiding predators, and maintaining their metabolic needs. In the wild, where a single bird may visit 1,000 flowers in a day, the cognitive demands are even greater. Each flower represents a point in 3-dimensional space, a nectar refill rate that may vary depending on weather and time of day, and a memory of whether that flower has been productive in the past. Studies have also shown that hummingbirds can navigate to within 70 centimeters of a remembered flower location, even when there are no visual markers to guide them. The flower may have been removed entirely, and yet the bird will fly to the exact spot where it remembers finding nectar, hovering in empty air before moving on to search elsewhere. This level of spatial precision, maintained across dozens or hundreds of locations, speaks to an internal map of extraordinary detail. Their memory is not limited to space. They also remember individual people. If you maintain a hummingbird feeder and keep it filled consistently, the birds that visit will learn to recognize you. They will return year after year, and some individuals will approach closely when they see you, apparently understanding that you are the source of the food they depend on. This is not anthropomorphism or wishful thinking. It is a documented behavior, one more example of the hummingbird's capacity to process and retain complex information. But perhaps the most startling adaptation in the hummingbird's cognitive architecture lies in how its brain processes motion. In most vertebrates, including humans, the visual centers of the brain respond most strongly to movement along the front-to-back axis. This makes sense for creatures that move primarily forward and backward. When a predator approaches or prey flees, the motion occurs along this axis, and our brains are wired to detect and respond to it with maximum sensitivity. Hummingbirds, however, spend much of their time hovering in 3-dimensional space, where threats and opportunities can come from any direction. A gust of wind may push them sideways. A predator may strike from below. A flower may dangle above or to the side. Recent research has revealed that the visual processing centers in hummingbird brains do not prioritize front-to-back motion the way other animals do. Instead, they respond equally to movement in all directions. This allows the bird to remain aware of its surroundings from every angle, giving it the spatial awareness necessary for safe, efficient hovering. Additionally, researchers found that hummingbird brains are tuned to respond more strongly to fast movements than to slow ones. This seems counterintuitive at first, since hovering is a low-speed activity. But when you consider that predators attack quickly and that other hummingbirds engage in high-speed chases during territorial disputes, the adaptation makes perfect sense. The brain is optimized for detecting rapid threats and changes, even while the bird itself hovers almost motionless. Despite all these cognitive abilities, despite the metabolic fire burning constantly within them, hummingbirds cannot sustain their intensity indefinitely. As evening falls and darkness spreads across the landscape, a hummingbird faces a dilemma. It can no longer see flowers. It cannot feed, yet its body continues to demand energy. If the bird tried to maintain its normal daytime body temperature and metabolic rate throughout the night, it would burn through its fat reserves in a matter of hours and die before dawn. To survive, hummingbirds have evolved the ability to enter torpor, a state of deep physiological shutdown that resembles hibernation but occurs on a nightly basis. Torpor is not sleep. Sleep is a state of rest in which the body continues to function at near normal levels, repairing tissues, consolidating memories, and maintaining temperature. Torpor is something else entirely. It is a controlled plunge into near death, a temporary suspension of the systems that define warm-blooded life. When a hummingbird enters torpor, its metabolic rate can drop to as little as 1/15 of its normal resting rate. Its body temperature, which during the day hovers around 105 degrees Fahrenheit, can fall by 50 degrees or more. In deep torpor, a hummingbird's body temperature may drop to just 55 degrees Fahrenheit, barely above the ambient air temperature. The heart rate slows dramatically. Breathing becomes shallow and irregular. To an observer, the bird appears dead. It hangs motionless from a branch, unresponsive to touch, its tiny body cold and limp. This is not a single, uniform state. Recent studies using infrared thermal imaging have revealed that there are multiple levels of torpor. Shallow torpor involves a body temperature drop of around 20 degrees. Deep torpor involves drops of 50 degrees or more. Between these extremes, and between torpor and normal sleep, lie transitional stages where the bird's physiology shifts gradually. The ability to fine-tune the depth of torpor allows hummingbirds to balance energy conservation against the need to remain capable of warming up and escaping if danger arises. Waking from torpor is not instantaneous. It can take up to 30 minutes for a hummingbird to generate enough internal heat to raise its body temperature back to functional levels. During this time, the bird is vulnerable, unable to fly or defend itself. The process requires burning through stored fat to produce heat, and birds that enter the night without sufficient fat reserves may not survive until morning. This is why feeding late in the day is so critical. A hummingbird that goes to roost with inadequate fat stores faces a stark choice: enter torpor and risk being unable to warm up again, or try to maintain body temperature and run out of energy before dawn. At least 42 bird species are known to use some form of torpor, but only hummingbirds, nightjars, and one species of mousebird regularly enter deep torpor. The ability to do so represents an evolutionary gamble. Torpor saves energy, but it also renders the bird helpless. In regions where nighttime temperatures drop sharply, or where food availability is unpredictable, this trade-off can mean the difference between survival and death. The eyes of a hummingbird are also remarkable instruments, adapted for the unique demands of their lifestyle. Hummingbirds possess superb visual acuity, capable of resolving fine details and tracking rapid movements. Their vision extends into the ultraviolet spectrum, allowing them to see colors and patterns that are invisible to humans. Flowers that appear uniformly colored to our eyes may display complex ultraviolet markings that guide hummingbirds to nectar sources. For many years, it was assumed that hummingbirds had a strong preference for red flowers, and indeed, red is the predominant color of hummingbird feeders found across North America. However, research has since revealed that the relationship between hummingbirds and red flowers is more nuanced. Red does serve as an effective signal to attract a hummingbird's attention, especially during the bird's first visit to an area. The warm tones of red, orange, and yellow stand out vividly against the cool greens of foliage, making red flowers easier to spot from a distance. But once a hummingbird has visited a flower or feeder and found it rewarding, color becomes far less important. The bird remembers the location and associates it with food. On subsequent visits, it will return to that spot regardless of color. If you were to replace a red feeder with a blue one in the same location, the hummingbird would continue visiting without hesitation. What matters most is not the hue of the flower, but the quality and quantity of nectar it provides. Hummingbirds are quick learners, and they update their internal maps constantly based on which flowers deliver the best rewards. They can also assess the sugar concentration of nectar with remarkable precision. Given a choice between two flowers with different nectar concentrations, a hummingbird will consistently choose the richer source. This ability allows them to forage efficiently, focusing their energy on the most productive feeding sites and ignoring those that offer minimal return. Interestingly, hummingbirds have almost no sense of smell. While many animals rely heavily on olfactory cues to locate food, hummingbirds navigate almost entirely by vision and memory. This makes sense for creatures that feed on flowers, which often advertise their nectar through bright colors and conspicuous placement rather than through scent. The lack of a well-developed olfactory system also frees up space and weight in the skull, contributing to the bird's overall lightness. Feeding strategies vary among hummingbird species depending on the flowers they favor and the environments they inhabit. Some species are highly territorial, establishing and defending feeding territories with fierce aggression. If the flowers in a given area produce nectar continuously and in large quantities, it makes sense for a hummingbird to claim that area as its own and drive away competitors. This is the behavior most commonly observed at backyard feeders, where multiple hummingbirds engage in high-speed chases, diving at one another, chittering loudly, and occasionally even striking each other in mid-air. Male hummingbirds are particularly aggressive. Their iridescent throat feathers serve a dual purpose. They attract females during courtship, but they also function as territorial signals to rival males. When two males confront each other, they will often hover face to face, flaring their gorgets to display their colors as brightly as possible. The intensity of the iridescence acts as a threat display, and the bird with the more vivid, more intimidating gorget often wins the standoff without physical contact. If neither bird backs down, the confrontation can escalate into a chase that covers considerable distance, with both birds flying at top speed through complex aerial maneuvers until one finally gives up and retreats. Other species adopt a different strategy called traplining. This approach is more common among hummingbirds that feed from flowers with lower nectar production rates. Rather than defending a single territory, a traplining hummingbird establishes a circuit that includes multiple feeding sites spread across a wider area. The bird visits each site in turn, moving along a regular route that it repeats daily or even multiple times per day. The name comes from the practice of fur trappers who would check a series of traps laid out across a landscape. Like a trapper walking his trap line, the hummingbird follows its route, harvesting nectar as it goes and allowing each flower time to refill before the next visit. Nectar is not the only item on the menu. While hummingbirds are often thought of as exclusive nectar feeders, they also consume significant quantities of small insects and spiders. These provide essential protein, vitamins, and minerals that nectar alone cannot supply. A hummingbird may snatch insects from the air in brief acrobatic pursuits, or it may glean them from leaves and bark. During breeding season, when females are producing eggs and feeding growing chicks, protein intake becomes especially important. The long-distance migrations undertaken by some hummingbird species rank among the most impressive feats in the avian world. While the majority of hummingbird species are non-migratory, living year-round in tropical or subtropical regions, a small number undertake journeys that seem almost impossible for creatures so tiny. The rufous hummingbird, in particular, holds the record for one of the longest migrations relative to body size of any bird species on Earth. Twice each year, rufous hummingbirds travel between their breeding grounds in Alaska and their wintering grounds in Mexico, a round-trip distance of approximately 7,800 miles. To put this in perspective, imagine a bird weighing less than 4 grams flying the equivalent distance from New York to Los Angeles and back, twice a year, with no opportunity to rest on water and limited opportunities to feed along the way. The ruby-throated hummingbird, the most common species in eastern North America, undertakes a migration nearly as grueling. Each fall, these birds fly south from their breeding territories in the United States and Canada toward wintering grounds in Central America. Many cross the Gulf of Mexico in a single, non-stop flight that can last 18 to 20 hours and cover 500 miles of open water. This journey requires meticulous preparation. In the weeks leading up to migration, a hummingbird will increase its feeding rate and begin converting surplus sugar into fat. A bird that normally weighs 3 grams may nearly double its weight, packing on an additional 1 to 2 grams of fat. This might not sound like much, but for a creature this small, it represents a massive energy reserve. The fat stored in those final weeks will fuel the entire crossing. There is no opportunity to feed while flying over open ocean, and a bird that fails to accumulate sufficient fat will not survive the flight. Once airborne over the Gulf, the hummingbird relies on favorable winds to assist its progress. Even so, the energy expenditure is enormous. By the time it reaches the far shore, the bird will have burned through most or all of its fat reserves and will be in desperate need of food. Upon landing, it must immediately locate flowers or other food sources to replenish its depleted stores before continuing south. The return journey in spring follows a similar pattern, though many ruby-throated hummingbirds take a slightly different route flying north along the Texas coast rather than crossing the Gulf directly. Hummingbirds migrate alone, not in flocks. Each individual makes the journey independently, relying on innate navigational abilities and environmental cues to find its way. Young birds making their first migration have no guide, no experienced adults to follow. They simply set out when the time feels right, flying in the correct direction toward a destination they have never seen. How they accomplish this remains one of the great mysteries of avian biology. It is likely that they use a combination of celestial cues, magnetic field detection, and landscape features, but the precise mechanisms are still being studied. The reproductive cycle of hummingbirds is as remarkable as every other aspect of their biology. Hummingbirds do not form pair bonds. Mating is a brief, transactional affair. A male establishes a territory and performs elaborate courtship displays to attract passing females. These displays often involve steep, high-speed dives, accompanied by distinctive sounds. In some species, the tail feathers produce loud chirps or trills during the dive, created by air rushing through the feathers at high velocity. The male climbs high into the air, then plummets toward the ground, pulling up at the last moment and often flying directly toward the female he is courting. If the female is receptive, mating occurs. And then the male immediately departs. He takes no part in nest building, incubation, or raising the young. His role is finished. Every female hummingbird is in effect a single mother. She alone must find a suitable nest site, construct the nest, lay the eggs, incubate them, and feed the chicks until they are ready to fledge. The nest itself is an architectural wonder. The female gathers small pieces of plant down, moss, lichen, and bark, then binds these materials together using spider silk. The spider silk is crucial. It provides both strength and elasticity, allowing the nest to stretch as the chicks grow. A newly built nest may be no larger than half a walnut shell, but by the time the chicks are ready to leave, it will have expanded significantly. The female shapes the nest into a deep cup and often decorates the exterior with bits of lichen or moss, camouflaging it against the branch on which it sits. She lays 2 tiny white eggs, each weighing around 0.4 grams. In the giant hummingbird, the eggs are slightly larger, reaching about 1.4 grams each. For comparison, a chicken egg weighs approximately 50 grams, making it more than 100 times heavier than the egg of a small hummingbird species. The female incubates the eggs for anywhere from 14 to 23 days, depending on the species and ambient temperature. During this time, she must leave the nest periodically to feed, but she keeps her absences as brief as possible to prevent the eggs from cooling. When the chicks hatch, they are blind, featherless, and utterly helpless. They weigh less than a gram each, roughly the size of a small jelly bean. The female feeds them by regurgitating a mixture of nectar and partially digested insects directly into their mouths. As they grow, their demands increase, and the mother must work tirelessly to provide enough food. She may make dozens of feeding trips per day, each one requiring her to locate flowers, consume nectar, catch insects, and return to the nest. Despite her efforts, many chicks do not survive. Predation, starvation, and exposure to weather all take a toll. Those that do survive fledge after about 3 weeks, leaving the nest as fully formed miniature adults. Even after fledging, they remain dependent on their mother for a short time as they learn to feed themselves. Once they master the art of hovering and locating flowers, they disperse, and the mother is free to begin the cycle again if conditions permit. The lifespan of a hummingbird in the wild is generally short, with most individuals living 3 to 5 years. However, banding studies have documented some individuals surviving for more than a decade. A ruby-throated hummingbird banded in the United States was recaptured 12 years later, still healthy and breeding. Given the metabolic stress these birds endure and the countless dangers they face during migration, such longevity is impressive. At present, the future of hummingbirds is uncertain. While many species remain common and widespread, others are declining rapidly. As of 2025, 21 hummingbird species are listed as endangered or critically endangered, and approximately 191 species are experiencing population declines. The primary threat is habitat loss. As forests are cleared for agriculture, as meadows are paved for development, and as climate change alters the timing of flowering seasons, hummingbirds lose the resources they depend on. In North America, several species have seen dramatic population decreases. The rufous hummingbird, once abundant across the western United States and Canada, has lost as much as 67% of its population since 1970. Calliope, Allen's, broad-tailed, and Costa's hummingbirds have also experienced significant declines. Even the ruby-throated hummingbird, the most populous species in eastern North America, saw a 17% decrease in population during the early 21st century. The causes are complex and interconnected. Habitat destruction removes the flowers and nesting sites that hummingbirds need. Pesticides reduce insect populations, depriving the birds of essential protein. Glass windows on buildings cause fatal collisions. Domestic cats, allowed to roam outdoors, kill millions of birds each year. Climate change disrupts the delicate timing of migration and flowering, potentially causing mismatches where birds arrive at their breeding grounds before flowers have bloomed or after peak nectar production has passed. Yet there are also reasons for cautious optimism. Anna's hummingbird, once restricted to coastal California and Baja California, has expanded its range dramatically over the past few decades. It now breeds as far north as British Columbia and as far east as Arizona. This expansion is largely attributed to the widespread planting of non-native flowering plants, the use of backyard hummingbird feeders, and the species' natural adaptability. In the Pacific Northwest, Anna's hummingbirds have proven capable of surviving cold winters that would have been lethal just a few generations ago, suggesting that the species is evolving in response to new conditions. Conservation efforts are underway to protect vulnerable species and their habitats. Citizen science projects such as eBird, Feeder Watch, and Hummingbirds at Home collect data from thousands of observers across the Americas, tracking population trends, migration patterns, and habitat use. This information helps scientists identify regions where conservation action is most urgently needed and monitor the effectiveness of protection measures. Individuals can also make a difference. Planting native flowers that provide nectar throughout the growing season creates valuable habitat. Avoiding pesticide use protects the insects that hummingbirds rely on for protein. Keeping cats indoors prevents predation. Installing window decals or screens reduces collisions. Even a single well-maintained hummingbird feeder can provide critical support during migration or periods when natural flowers are scarce. The relationship between hummingbirds and the flowers they pollinate is one of mutual dependence. Many plant species have evolved flowers specifically shaped to accommodate hummingbird bills. These flowers tend to be tubular, brightly colored, and produce copious nectar. In return for this bounty, the hummingbird inadvertently carries pollen from one flower to another, facilitating reproduction. Some plants are so specialized that they can only be pollinated by a single species of hummingbird, and that a hummingbird, in turn, may feed almost exclusively from that plant. Such partnerships are marvels of coevolution, but they also create vulnerability. If one partner declines or disappears, the other may follow. In the Andes, where hummingbird diversity reaches its peak, researchers have documented extraordinary examples of this coevolution. Sword-billed hummingbirds possess bills longer than their entire body, allowing them to feed from flowers with exceptionally deep corollas. Other species have curved bills that match the curvature of specific blooms. These adaptations represent millions of years of evolutionary fine-tuning, with each generation of birds and plants exerting selective pressure on the other. The result is a landscape filled with partnerships so intricate that they seem almost designed, though in truth they emerged through the slow, patient work of natural selection. The aggressive territoriality displayed by many hummingbird species might seem at odds with their delicate appearance, but it is a direct consequence of their energetic demands. For a bird that must consume its body weight in food every day, every flower represents a crucial resource. Allowing competitors free access to those resources would mean going hungry. Thus, the battles we observe at feeders, the high-speed chases and aggressive posturing, are not arbitrary violence. They are the behaviors of creatures living on the edge of energetic viability, fighting for survival in a world where every calorie counts. Yet, despite their aggression toward one another, hummingbirds rarely cause serious harm. The chases are ritualized, and actual physical contact is uncommon. Once dominance is established, the subordinate bird usually retreats rather than risk injury. This restraint makes sense. An injured hummingbird cannot fly efficiently, cannot feed effectively, and will likely die. The risk of fighting to the point of injury outweighs the benefit of gaining access to a single flower or feeder. Some aspects of hummingbird biology remain mysterious even after decades of study. How do they navigate during migration with such precision? What internal cues trigger the onset of torpor each night? How do they integrate spatial and temporal information to create their mental maps of flower locations? How do they manage to avoid neurological damage despite their extremely rapid heart rates and blood flow? Each answer leads to new questions, and the hummingbird continues to challenge our understanding of what is possible in a living organism. There is also much we still do not know about their communication. While hummingbirds lack the complex songs of many other bird species, they do produce a variety of vocalizations. These include chips, chirps, squeaks, and buzzing sounds, each used in different contexts. Males may vocalize during courtship or territorial disputes. Females vocalize to communicate with their chicks or to signal submission to a dominant male. Some species also produce mechanical sounds with their wings or tail feathers, creating acoustic signals that travel farther than vocalizations alone. The meaning and structure of these communication systems are still being decoded. Another area of active research involves understanding how hummingbirds avoid damage from reactive oxygen species, the harmful byproducts of intense metabolism. In most animals, high metabolic rates lead to increased production of free radicals, which can damage cells and contribute to aging. Hummingbirds, despite their extreme metabolic intensity, do not appear to suffer accelerated aging or increased cancer rates. They must possess biochemical defenses that neutralize these harmful molecules more effectively than other vertebrates. Identifying and understanding these defenses could have implications for human health, potentially offering insights into how to protect cells from oxidative damage. The hummingbird's kidneys are another marvel. During a day of heavy nectar feeding, a hummingbird may consume up to 5 times its body weight in liquid. This creates a massive challenge for the kidneys, which must filter out excess water while retaining essential salts and nutrients. Hummingbird kidneys handle this by adjusting their filtration rate dynamically. When the bird is feeding and water intake is high, the kidneys work at maximum capacity, producing copious dilute urine to expel the excess water. But at night, during torpor, when the bird is not drinking, the kidneys nearly shut down, preserving every drop of water to prevent dehydration. This ability to modulate kidney function so precisely is rare among birds, and speaks to the extreme physiological flexibility required to live as a hummingbird. Even the structure of their legs and feet reflects their specialization. Hummingbird legs are small and weak, compared to those of other birds. They are used almost exclusively for perching, not for walking or hopping. The feet have sharp claws that allow the bird to grip branches securely, but the muscles that control them are not powerful. This is another weight-saving adaptation. Legs strong enough for walking would add unnecessary mass, reducing flight efficiency. By minimizing leg and foot muscle, the hummingbird keeps its weight as low as possible, dedicating the saved mass to flight muscles instead. The bones of a hummingbird are also adapted for flight. Like those of all birds, they are hollow and reinforced with internal struts, combining strength with lightness. The sternum, or breastbone, is exceptionally large and features a prominent keel to which the powerful pectoral muscles attach. The wing bones are relatively short and stiff, providing a solid framework for the rapid, precise movements required for hovering. One curious aspect of hummingbird biology is their tolerance for flight in rain. Most small birds avoid flying in heavy rain because water adds weight and disrupts the aerodynamic properties of feathers. Hummingbirds, however, can fly in the rain without apparent difficulty. When water accumulates on their feathers, they shake their heads violently, much like a dog shaking off it after a bath. But unlike a dog, which might shake its head a few times, a hummingbird shakes its head approximately 132 times per second while in flight, rotating its head up to 202 degrees. This rapid, vigorous shaking dislodges water droplets, allowing the bird to maintain flight performance even in wet conditions. The hummingbird also possesses an unusual number of neck vertebrae compared to most mammals. While humans and most other mammals have 7 neck vertebrae, hummingbirds have 14 or 15. This gives them exceptional flexibility, allowing them to twist and angle their heads with great precision while feeding. A hummingbird can hold its body perfectly still while hovering and still rotate its head to track a flower moving in the breeze or to watch for approaching rivals. It is easy to romanticize hummingbirds, to see them as delicate fairies flitting through gardens without a care. But the truth is more profound and more moving. These are not fragile creatures living in some enchanted realm. They are survivors, warriors in miniature, engaging in a daily struggle that would break animals 10 times their size. Every moment of a hummingbird's life is a high-stakes gamble against the fundamental laws of thermodynamics. They push the limits of what vertebrate physiology can achieve, operating in a metabolic zone that should be impossible to sustain. And yet they endure. They migrate thousands of miles. They survive freezing nights. They defend territories with ferocity. They raise their young alone. They remember vast landscapes in perfect detail. They navigate by sunlight and magnetism and memory. They drink the world's sweetness and burn it into speed and color and life. When you watch a hummingbird hover beside a flower, you are witnessing one of nature's most improbable achievements. You are seeing a creature that exists at the very edge of biological possibility, sustained by adaptations so specialized, so finely tuned that they border on the miraculous. The hummingbird is a reminder that life, when pressed to its limits, can achieve things that seem to defy physics itself. As we come to the end of this gentle exploration, let your mind settle on that image. A tiny bird, no heavier than a coin, its wings a blur, its heart beating faster than thought, its brain tracking a world of flowers across space and time. It hovers in the sunlight, green and gold and ruby fire, alive with an intensity we can barely comprehend. And then, in an instant, it is gone, vanishing into the vastness of the sky. If this journey through the world of hummingbirds has brought you even a moment of wonder, I invite you to like this video and subscribe to the Sleepy Science Society. Your support helps these quiet explorations reach others who seek the beauty hidden in the details of the natural world. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Tell us about the hummingbirds you have seen. Share your own moments of wonder. But for now, simply rest. Let the images fade. Let your breathing slow. The hummingbird has shown us what is possible when life refuses to accept limits. Let that knowledge settle softly into your awareness as you drift toward sleep. You do not need to remember every detail. You only need to carry with you the sense of wonder, the quiet awe that comes from glimpsing, even for a moment, the extraordinary hidden within the small. Good night.